And we want to bring in two real experts in the law as it relates to these things. Former Attorney General under George W. Bush, Alberto Gonzales, joins us now from Nashville. Mr. Attorney General, as you look at this situation that is playing out there in the highways of Arizona, give us a sense of how the law looks at this. You have the First Amendment rights of the protesters to freely assemble and the First Amendment rights of Donald Trump supporters to get to where they're going, and as Steve Pomerantz pointed out, the First Amendment, the rights of every American to use that highway.
Sure, of course, the protesters do have the right to peacefully assemble and make their views known. They don't have necessarily the right to do it on the public highway, and I suspect they don't have a permit to do so, and I suspect the police are going to try to ask them to leave voluntarily, and if they fail to do that and they continue to break the law, then there should be consequences, and it may involve, actually going to jail. Again, they do have the right to peacefully protest and assemble and make their views known, but they don't have the right to do it on a public highway without a permit. And so I suspect that hopefully this will be resolved in a way that it doesn't escalate into violence. So that would be very unfortunate. But the Trump supporters do have the right to go to this rally. And I think what's interesting, if I'm a Trump supporter and I'm sitting in that line for a long period of time, or if I'm denied from going at all, I'm going to be furious. And that's going to motivate me, I think, even more to be supportive of Donald Trump. So while I understand what the protesters are trying to achieve here, I think it's very likely that it's going to backfire and motivate the Trump supporters even more.
I want to understand here how the politics of this play out, in your opinion. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who's the sheriff of Maricopa County there out in Phoenix, is a Donald Trump supporter. He's endorsed Donald Trump. We have the video of the endorsement right here. At the same time, he's the guy who is going to be responsible for keeping the traffic clear. It seems as though there's at least the appearance of a real conflict there.
Well, not at all. He's got a job to do, and the fact that he's exercised his right and made an announcement as to who's going to support for president doesn't mean that he's disqualified from serving as law enforcement in that area. So, no, absolutely not. He's got a responsibility to make sure that the safety of both the protesters and those trying to achieve the Trump rally are achieved and maintained. And so, no, I don't view that as a conflict whatsoever. He's got a job. That is his job, and he ought to discharge his responsibility.
If I may jump in here, sir, the sheriff had said with a number of reporters that there had been some mumblings of demonstrations ahead of this event. From a law enforcement perspective, how do you prepare for something like this? Because there had been multiple reports and mumblings, but how can you prevent an incident to escalate like this, especially when it comes to preventing closing down a highway?
Well, law enforcement, they need to keep calm, and I think there needs to be sort of an overwhelming show of force. It needs to have a sufficient number of officers there to make it very clear to the protesters that their continued efforts to shut down this freeway is not going to be tolerated. It will not be successful. Again, it's very important that the police remain calm, that there's clear understanding, clear communication about the repercussions of this continued action. But I think this is, again, I fully expect local law enforcement to act in a professional manner, and I'm very hopeful that this will be resolved without any violence whatsoever.
Just so we keep our viewers understanding of what's going on the left-hand side of your screen is live pictures of the Trump rally in Fountain Hills, Arizona. That's the stage you can see, big American flag. Looks like they're just getting ready there ahead of this rally. Police there had said there was 10,000 people who were supposed to show up. We don't know how many have been stuck in the traffic trying to get to this rally. And what's interesting as we continue our coverage of not only the politics of this, but also the police action in terms of whether they're going to have to break up this protest and actually the protesters will sit down or be forced into having some arrests made. We have Steve Pomerantz, former assistant director of the FBI, who's been looking at a lot of the pictures that have been coming into us. And as you noted, it appears as though the police either weren't really prepared for this or didn't exactly know where it's going to happen. Because most of the pictures we've seen of this highway with miles of traffic backed up don't have any police officers.
Yeah, no, I think that's a safe guess at this point from what we're seeing on these feeds, that they didn't have prior notice and were not prepared. And I'm not, again, I don't think that's a criticism, just the reality. I mean, they have hundreds of miles of roads, all kinds of things that could have been done. And if they had no prior knowledge through some sort of intelligence network or somebody who called, this broke out spontaneously. And it's especially difficult if, as we're hearing, it's potentially a number of different sites. But the feed we're getting, I don't see any evidence of law enforcement response yet, which I'm curious about as to why they haven't as yet confronted these people and moved them out of the middle of the road.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of sheriff's deputies here and there. We saw them tow a couple of cars, but we haven't seen any kind of organized response in terms of, you know, dozens of officers in riot gear or vans that were prepared or something like that to sort of move in a tactical way and try to really clear this out.
Yeah, well, not to second guess. Again, I'm sitting, one of the things I always objected to in an operational scenario was people sitting 1,000 miles away and criticizing what I'm doing. But I don't think we're ready yet for riot gear. I don't think we're ready for that based on what I'm seeing.
Needed it last night in Chicago.
Well, things that escalated beyond what I'm seeing here. I don't see any signs of violence. I don't see any, but again, some response has to be made. I think General Gonzalez made all the correct points, and at some point in time, the law enforcement is going to have to step in and get more aggressive.
What do they do at this point? How do you allocate resources? Because if law enforcement and obviously the sheriff said that they were prepared for perhaps protests, but perhaps they were prepared for protests on site in Fountain Hill, and we don't know exactly how many miles away this is, but how do you reallocate resources, especially if they're unable to get to the location, if you have all of your resources spread out in other parts of the region?
Well, a couple of things. I'm sure you're right that they were prepared, which means to me he had a number of people on duty, a larger number of people than he might have had on a normal Saturday morning, that they were prepared tactically, they were assembled in a way to be able to respond to an incident. I assume that's the case. If that's so, and I'm pretty sure it is, they will be able to respond to this. I mean, it's just not that big of an area that they can't respond.
Okay. Want to get in one more question before the break with Judge Gonzalez, former Attorney General. As you're watching these pictures, sir, are you a little bit surprised that we have gotten to this point? You know, in 2008 and 2004, we had protests and those kinds of things, but I never remembered shutting down highways en route to political events.
There's nothing about this campaign season that surprises me anymore. No, absolutely not. Obviously, emotions are high. There's a lot at stake as a result of this election, given where we are as a country today. Some very controversial issues, and people feel very passionately about some of these issues. So, no, again, so long as they exercise their constitutional rights consistent with the law, that's perfectly appropriate here in America.
All right, former Attorney General Alberto Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, Steve Pomerantz, we very much appreciate your perspective and as we watch this all unfold.